Matthews, and I go to Galloway Elementary, and I am grade 4th.
Hi, my name is Romina Serna, and I go to Galloway Elementary.
Today we're going to be reading Chris Barton. So, hello.
Hi. Nice to meet you both.
So, we will be asking him questions, and he will be answering. What inspired you to become a writer?
What inspired me to become a writer? Well, I've always enjoyed writing. I've enjoyed writing stories either by myself or with friends of mine as early as elementary school. But when I was 29 years old and one of my children was a toddler, he was almost 2 years old, there was a story he wanted me to tell him over and over and over about how I installed a smoke alarm at our house, which is not a very interesting story to most people, but to toddlers it's fascinating. But he asked me to tell him that story so many times, I thought I would write it down, and then I thought, well, what if I try to make books? And that's where I got started.
What's the best part about being an author?
I think the part I like most about being an author is the community of people I get to be a part of. I get to spend time with other writers, with illustrators, with librarians, with readers, with people who sell books and love books, and it's a great bunch of people to get to spend time with, and so I love that part of my job.
What is the hardest part about your job?
The hardest part about my job, I think the single hardest thing for me about writing, especially about writing my books, is stopping my research, because I always want to just keep digging and digging and digging and trying to find more information. I love research, and stopping is hard. But sometimes you do have to stop so you can write the book.
How long did it take you to write your first book?
The Dayglow Brothers was my first book, and it took me almost exactly 8 years from the day I started researching it to deciding I wanted to write this book until the day it was published.
Which one of your books are you most proud of?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think there are two books come to mind: The Amazing Age of John Roy Lynch, and What Do You Do with a Voice Like That? The Story of Extraordinary Congresswoman Barbara Jordan. And it so happens that they're both about people who were elected to Congress, one in the 1870s, one in the 1970s. But I'm inspired by both of their stories. I'm so glad that people who are growing up in Texas, like I did, are going to know a lot more about these two people, John Roy Lynch and Barbara Jordan, than I did while I was growing up.
You of any subjects in your notification books changed due to what you learned about them while you were writing books?
Well, some of these subjects I didn't know much about at all when I started researching. The nonfiction books I've written, I haven't written them because I was already an expert in them. I wrote them because I didn't know anything about them, but I got curious. So, for instance, the Dayglow Brothers, that first book of mine, everything that I knew by the end about how those Dayglow colors worked, that's stuff that I learned along the way. And that's one of the things that excites me so much about writing nonfiction is knowing that it's all going to be new information to me. I think the thing that I was especially, of all my books, the thing that was the most eye-opening was learning about the topic of Reconstruction, which appeared right after the Civil War. That was the setting for The Amazing Age of John Roy Lynch. And Reconstruction was not taught very well at all when I was growing up. And so I learned so much more in writing this book than I ever knew when I was in elementary school, middle school, and high school.
How many books have you sold?
Well, the number of books of mine that have been sold to publishers, so the number of titles of books that have been sold, I've sold 21 books. So I have 17 of those books have been published, 4 more are on the way. As far as how many individual books of mine have been sold, I have no idea, because I've worked with lots of different publishers and they all keep different numbers of those, and I have not added them up, so I don't know how many copies I've sold. Hundreds of thousands, but I don't know how many hundreds of thousands.
Have you won any awards?
Yes, the awards of mine that are the most meaningful to me the Dayglow brothers won what's called a Cybert honor. You've probably heard of the Caldecott or the Newbery. The Cybert is sort of a cousin of the Caldecott and the Newbery. It's for information books, for nonfiction books. So my first book, the Dayglow brothers, won the runner-up prize for the Cybert medal. And Dazzle Ships, which is one of my more recent nonfiction books, it won an Orbis Pictus honor. So that's a different award given for informational books. Instead of being given by librarians like the Cybert, Orbis Pictus is given by English teachers.
Oh, are you working on any books now?
I'm always working on books now. I've always got at least one book in the works, which is pretty handy when books can take 5 or 8 years or longer to make. I'm working on revising what I hope will be my first novel. I've never had any novels published yet, so that's an area where I'm actively working to get better. But I've also got a few nonfiction projects in the works. Either I'm researching them, or I'm writing, or I'm waiting to hear back about what work I need to do next. So yes, I've always got both fiction and nonfiction books in the works.
What is your favorite book written by someone else?
What is my favorite book written by someone else? Right now, my favorite book written by someone other than me is Revenge of the Teacher's Pets by Jennifer Ziegler. Jennifer is my wife. So I'm married to an author, and she has this series called The Brewster Triplets, about these identical triplets that live in a small Texas town. And the most recent book in that series is called Revenge of the Teacher's Pets. And I think it's the best book in the series. Funny, big-hearted, warm, family stories.
How did you come up with your ideas?
I've gotten ideas for my books from lots of places, from things that I've read, from movies I've watched, from things that I've heard or listened to, from things that I've observed going on inside my own home or in my neighborhood as I'm walking or running by myself with my dog. Ideas are all over the place, or potential ideas. And so, to me, I think the most important thing for any of us is just to keep our eyes and ears open, pay attention to the things that interest us and that we can't stop thinking about. But also, I try to always have a notepad and a pen with me, so whenever I have an idea, I don't forget what that idea was, because to me, there's nothing more frustrating than remembering that I have an idea, but not being able to remember what that idea actually was. So I try to write it down.
How did you come up with the characters in your fiction books?
Well, for instance, for Shark versus Train, those characters just sort of popped into my head one day as I was out jogging. I didn't set out on a run to come up with a story idea, but a lot of times that's what happens. But it's kind of a random set of characters, a shark versus a train pop into your head. But those came from the fact that one of my kids was really into, or had really been into, reading nonfiction books about sharks and really into playing with wooden trains. And so in our house, there's always sharks and trains and trains and sharks. But I thought, as I was running, I kind of let my mind wander, that you've got these two strong, dominant characters. Sharks are used to, doing really well in the ocean. Trains are used to performing really well on railroad tracks. But I thought, what if you put them in each other's environment, or in environments neither one was used to? What kind of characters would have the funniest reactions to those situations? So that's where Shark and Train came from. Sometimes a character comes first, then you think about what kind of situation would this character with their personality traits find themselves in. But sometimes it's, here's the situation, what type of character would be the most interesting to observe in this situation.
Do you write books by yourself, or do you work with others during the process?
Well, all of my books are a team effort to some extent, because I don't edit my books myself, I don't illustrate my books myself, I don't run the printing press that makes my books. So it's always been a team effort in some ways. But even for fiction books that I've written that I hope will become novels, even if my name is the only one that appears on the novel, there are still friends of mine that I'll share the books with, and I'll get feedback from them. I mentioned that my wife is an author. She's always the first person to read a story that I've written, just like I'm the first person to read a story that she's written. And so we give each other feedback, and other friends of ours, we give each other feedback on how to make our stories better. So yeah, it's always a collaboration in some ways. I hope someday, though, that Jennifer and I will actually write a story together, write a book together that both of our names appear on the cover of. The great thing about writing is it's very portable. You can do it just about anywhere. You can use lots of different tools. Eventually, my books I end up putting all those into a Word document. Before that point, you can write it in any way that works for you. The most important thing is to find a way that does work and a way that makes you productive and you can just keep the story going. The most important thing, though, is to write. You can't wait for the story to jump into your head fully formed. You have to write and revise and revise and revise.